Hey everyone. So I've just watched the rerun of the drama series Mr. Bates versus the Post Office on ITV with my dad. Um, they've done a rerun of this. It was initially broadcast in January. Very powerful stuff, you know. Toby Jones in the lead role, very good actor, very good at the role. Um, I thought went a little bit quickly into it, but I see how they were building it up because Bates himself had his case, and then they started connecting the dots to other cases. I thought went quite quickly into it. Um, but you know, revealing stuff. ITV's made a bit of a name for itself for gritty real life dramas. It's been known for doing a series of dramatizations of notorious serial killers, sometimes controversially so. But I think it's fair to say that this is a TV show that has effectively changed legal history, or at least had a big influence on it, more than any other show that I can think of in modern times. So, you know, the screenwriter and so on deserves respect. The show's creators deserve respect for playing a role in that. Um, what the post office scandal amounts to is probably the biggest miscarriage of justice in British judicial history. And there's a number of talking points around it. Now, this video, I'm really just summarizing it. I'm not going to go into extensive details. Um, a lot of them are already well known, and the committee hearings are ongoing. Um, but I think the whole case points to a couple of glaring issues. One of them is corporate arrogance. One of them is over reliance on technology. That's a big point, I think. Perhaps the third one, and it's closely related to the first, is the willingness, particularly in this country, of believing corporations. So I'm going to break this down a little bit. Well, let's first of all look at what the post office scandal was. If you're not familiar with it, it's been a big news story this year because it has all come to the fore. But for those involved, this has been going on for decades, since at least the early 2000s. Um, Lives have been destroyed, notwithstanding at least four suicides and at least 18 people who have subsequently passed away because of the duration that this has went on. One factors in extended families, you know, because it affects families as well, people who've had to be uprooted and leave their communities, children bullied in school, etc. What basically happened was sub postmasters across the United Kingdom, if you're watching this from another country, were basically accused of theft. They were accused of their accounts not adding up, i.e., theft. Um, and this all tied in with new technology that was introduced to the postal service Horizon via Fujitsu. Now, it's important to be clear that these were sub postmasters. We're not talking about big regional managers or town or city centre post offices. This were village post offices. This was, they were on the margins. Often these people would be doing it, and in some cases, they were doing other jobs at the same time. So it was low level management, really. And it's quite shocking now. I know people will say, "Oh, Nathan, you can't just." There will be people say you're basing this on a TV show. Well, what's striking is the post office themselves haven't disputed the show. They haven't said no, this is showing us unfairly, or it's all false, or it's they're portraying us unfairly. Paula Venables, I think it's safe to say, is probably one of the most unpopular people in the country right now. As far as I'm aware, she's never complained about the show. She's never said it's unfairly portraying her. Now, if it was me, if I was the CEO and I'd been portrayed unfairly, I would say the show is completely inaccurate. Maybe she has said that, I don't know. But that's interesting. It says to me that they know damn well that the show has actually done its homework and got this. Now, they make a disclaimer at the start that some scenes are imagined. Perhaps there's some emotive scenes that are imagined. But the basic story is there about how this happened, about how the sad thing about all of this is this isn't some anonymous company. This isn't some sort of new company that's been set up. It's a British institution, the post office. Dare I say it's one of our cultural symbols. When people think of the United Kingdom, what do they think of? They probably think of the royal family. They probably think of red post boxes. It's one of those things that people think of with the UK. Um, so that's sad. That that's now it's showing a dark side to it. And it went into the hundreds. I think what was particularly despicable, if you haven't seen the show, it showed this, the TV program, I should say. In every single case, they were told they were the only one. So there was a lot of gaslighting to lead these people to believe that they really had made mistakes. And, we're not talking a tenner here or there, it was thousands of pounds. In one case, Jo Hamilton in Hampshire, she was told, when she was trying to fix the problem, she was on this helpline and she wasn't particularly technically savvy by her own admission, but every time she tried to fix the problem, it kept escalating. And in the end, she confessed to false accounting because she deleted the discrepancies manually because the alternative was confessing to theft, which she hadn't done, and potentially going to prison. And there were so many cases like this. In one particularly tragic case, one sub-postmaster, I think it was in Merseyside, took his own life. He stepped in front of a bus, and there were at least 4 suicides connected to this. That isn't factoring in all the lives destroyed, hundreds and hundreds, when you factor in their extended families. Because, when someone is falsely accused of something, that absolutely affects their family as well. I understand some of the children were told, oh, your dad's a thief or your mum's a thief. And then it gets into other areas. In one case, it was Jo Hamilton again, because she was convicted of a crime, she couldn't be around a school setting. Now, it would be easy to dismiss this as just incompetence from the post office, but what I think is striking is that Paula Venables is head of the post office. Now, I don't think she's the only one, but I think she's a lot to answer for. The sheer level of I do not believe that a CEO on millions, she was on millions, that she couldn't have been aware of what was going on. She couldn't have been aware that there was dodgy technology, that Horizon wasn't foolproof. And the fact of the matter is, the post office clung to this. They defended Horizon. They said this is foolproof. It must be the sub postmasters. Now that is, I think Fujitsu incident, they shouldn't get off scot free. I think they should be scrutinised. What's troubling is apparently their technology is still used. But what we have here is the case. This is where I want to talk about the technology side of things. Just this computer says no. The technology must be right. So let's ignore the human being and just assume they're guilty. What I think is just particularly disgusting is the fact that they were told they were the only one. They weren't told that actually hundreds of people across the country in locations as diverse as Falkirk and South Wales were, implicated, and they weren't told actually there's other sub postmasters getting the same accusations against them. It was just the doggedness of Alan Bates to push this to set up a website. And his case wasn't even the worst. I understand what he done was set up a website that linked people together. Thank God for that website. I think there was something called Computer Weekly that also played a role in this. Um, it's only, this only came to the public attention really in the late 2010s. And this year it's all come out just how bad this is. But the sheer arrogance of of the post office, I was going to say Royal Mail, I have to remind myself they're separate entities now, but of the post office to push this, it's just um, staggering. To actually then spend money on defending themselves and to insist that these people were lying, and then to have the arrogance to mediate as if they could then play God with these people instead of just doing right by them and admitting that they got it wrong. I don't think Paula Venables is innocent. I mean, put it this way: if she really, I mean, what she said in these committee hearings is that she was all tearful and she was all sorry and she was misled by her own lawyers. Now, she was head of the company. She was on a very big salary. It is important when you consider people were made bankrupt by this. How could she not have known anything? At best, the best that could be said for her is she's sharing incompetent, that she didn't follow up on it. And she's not the only one. Ed Davey, the current Liberal Democrat leader, was the minister responsible at the time. He says that, the legal people from the post office misled him. But I think this taps into something that's quite rotten in our society, which is there is an assumption that an institution, in this case the post office, has to be believed over the little people, the sub postmasters. The technology must be right. And this has to be a wake up call because I don't think it's just the post office. I think it probably goes across the board. I think you'll find it in the armed forces, in the legal establishment, in the church. Um, there's just an assumption that those at the top must be believed. And that's not to say the public believe it, but when it comes to, even now, I understand the police have told Mr. Bates that they're being transparent about, possible corporate crimes having been committed. I think I'm no legal expert, but I would have thought if Paula Venables lied to MPs, if she hasn't been entirely honest in her proceedings, surely that will come into perverting the course of justice. And I'm not saying that as a matter of fact. I'm not a legal expert, but I would have thought that would be some sort of perverting the course of justice. If she's knowingly misleading people, knowing that innocent people were implicated in this, that's worse than incompetence. Incompetence is bad. But what I find disgusting is the fact that the postmasters were gaslighted, told they were the only ones, and then they had to go through so much legal bureaucracy. Paying out of their own pocket. They had to remortgage their houses. I think in some cases people became homeless. Lives were destroyed, and in that time they couldn't exactly just go on holiday and get on with their lives. This was a horrendous thing. Now the situation is Alan Bates and the others are campaigning for compensation, which every single one of them deserves. I think it also taps into corporate culture now. Paula Venables voluntarily rescinded her CBE. The King actually revoked it, or whatever the formal term for that is, in January when all of this came out. I mean, in the public way, I think the TV show really played a big role. But she got a bonus. Now, I think if compensation is handed out, it probably won't work this way, but I think it should come out of her bonus. This is an example of corporate rot. Why should Paula Venables or her subordinates? There was a woman working at the sort of information side of things that was supposed to help the sub postmasters. What came out of this, and I didn't realize this before I watched the program, was that Fujitsu had the power to have this remote access to sub postmasters' account and manipulate the ratings without the postmasters realizing what was going on. That is absolutely rotten. Absolutely rotten. Now, the program showed that there was a whistleblower from Fujitsu that showed what was going on. Um, like I say, there will be some artistic license in some particular scenes, but the legal side of things, they'd have to be careful about that. They couldn't just make things up for a dramatization. Um, some of it's imagined, some of the dialogue is imagined, but I think the basic gist of it, they would have had to do the research. They could just make things up, especially as this is ongoing, because then Paula Venables and co could turn around and say, they're giving us. I mean, put it this way: if it went to trial, if Paula Venables faced some sort of corporate crime charges and the others, she could say, "Oh, I'm not getting a fair hearing because of this program." As far as I know, she's never done that, which says to me that she knows damn well that she has lied to people, and it's wicked, particularly when she is an ordained priest of the Church of England. What she has done is not very Christian. You'd knowingly be complicit in the destruction of these people, or the grit of Alan Bates has seen this through, but lives were destroyed. Make no mistake about it, lives were destroyed. But I think it goes bigger. That the post office scandal should really be a wake up call. Where I do think there's too much reliance on technology. I think there is too much put on. I mean, this could even extend. And when we look at, I watched the program Seconds from Disaster. Often pilots are blamed when disasters happen, and sometimes it is human error. But this is why I'm very wary of things like AI, because there's just far too damn much reliance on technology. The machine must be correct. I don't think any machine can be 100% correct all the time. And that, when it gets into, truth regarding criminal proceedings, that it scares me, quite frankly. That the powers that be would sooner believe the technology than human beings. I mean, from a purely practical point of view, if these people were stealing from the post office, wouldn't they be going on fancy holidays? Wouldn't they be buying second homes? And then the fact that so many people had similar cases across the country in different locations all over the United Kingdom, it just doesn't make sense that, in all those cases, maybe one or two could have been stealing money. That happens. But I think the sheer arrogance. Another thing a lot of people have commented on is the bully boy tactics of their private investigators. These thugs. I'm going to use that word. The way there was no assumption of innocence. It was just treating people like they were criminals, and just this sort of intimidating, really pushy kind of. There was no assumption of innocence. It's disgusting how those people were treated. And they're not technical whiz kids. They're not legal experts. They're just ordinary people. It really is rotten. Now, to be fair to Rishi Sunak, he acted quick on this. He condemned it. He promised there'd be justice. I hope Starmer follows up from that when he becomes prime minister, as he almost certainly will in a few weeks. But it's I don't think the post office will be the only institution that has this sort of situation. I remember a case a few years ago where a man had dealing with his local law firm, and he had a bad experience with them, and he basically said they were a scam. Now, he said this in a review. Maybe that was the wrong word to use, but they basically countersued him, went to court, and the whole legal establishment backed them. Now, he insisted that his review was truthful. And what I found interesting about that was it seemed that they were pushing this because they simply didn't like the review that he made. Now, I understand that saying someone is a scam can be seen as slanderous in a legal sense, but it backfired because the public just looked at this as them being thin-skinned. But what was interesting was the judge and everyone immediately took their side. Now that is an example of what I'm talking about, of the establishment sticking together, because it was a law firm that was involved. The judge backed them rather than this individual who'd made the review. Um, I do think in this country, I don't think we necessarily have a class system, but I do think there is elitism. I do think there is a sense that corporations must be right. There's still a sense, even now, the police were very quick to arrest sub postmasters and push that. And I'm not going to blame the police entirely for this, they were doing their job, but there is a different set of standards. Why is it Paula Fennels gets to walk free? You know, she really should be under investigation at this point, because it's not just a case of incompetence. I think it would be perverting the course of justice if she knowingly let innocent people go to prison. Now, that in her position should be seen as perverting the course of justice. I'm not a legal expert. It's not for me to say if that is the case or not. It's just my opinion. But um, if it hadn't been for Mr. Bates pushing this, and I give ITV credit, I've criticised ITV at times, but I'll give them credit for this. The whole thing is just rotten. And there's, those people who took their own lives. There's no going back from that, except they can be posthumously vindicated. But I think it has to bring into question corporate arrogance. It has to bring into question over reliance on technology. With no questions asked, the technology must be right, even though all these people are having similar problems. And corporate accountability as well. I also think if it is proven, and I emphasize proven, that there's criminal wrongdoing by someone like Paula Venables, she should go to prison. Absolutely. Now, one of the sub postmasters that went to prison said he wouldn't wish that on anyone. He's being very gracious. I don't think corporate crime should be above the law, because there is a sense, I think, in the UK that justice is somewhat elitist. And I think cases like this, if there isn't some people at the senior levels of the post office facing criminal proceedings. I'm not saying they should go to jail. And a fine, I'm not sure how much that weighs. You know, losing her title, yes, she's disgraced, but her bonus, every single penny that she got in bonuses should be revoked. Bonus money. It's just, there's something rotten about that. And I just hope this is a wake up call. So the next time we see, a trajectory where there is people in different locations and they're all going through the same experience and it's at the hands of some sort of corporation or institution, people should remember the post office scandal. And I'm not saying two cases are exactly alike, but if it involves technology, if people are being accused of something and they insist that they're innocent and it isn't adding up, there really needs to be it needs to be treated in a different way, i.e., there should be a much greater assumption of innocence. And another thing that's disgraceful about this is the post office got to call the shots. There's just a gross sense of unfairness where they got to call the shots so much of the time and, gaslight people. It's rotten, absolutely rotten. I mean, Paula Venos, I think's a lot to answer for, but I don't think she's the only one. And I just hope that some justice is seen. I hope greater compensation could be given out. People might have seen the figure 58 million, think, well, what are they complaining about? That's a lot of money. But the point is, a lot of that went to legal fees. And in the end, it worked out around 20,000 each. In some cases, people lost 300,000. So when it factors out, it may well be that they don't see every penny that they're owed, but there has to be justice from this. I think that corporate criminal charges need to be filed against the post office and heads need to roll, metaphorically, because there cannot be a case where the rich and powerful are seen as above justice.